We're going to have a look at what the newspapers are saying about the UK referendum now. Claire Williams is with us here on set. It is very much a big day in Britain, isn't it, Claire?
It's a very big day for Britain today. So the Brexit referendum has finally come around with June 23rd. Today is the day that British people are going to be voting to decide whether they're going to stay in the EU or not. Obviously, this is dominating all the British papers. It's also dominating a lot of papers in other European countries. I'll start with the British papers, though. The Daily Mail nailed 4 big EU lies. And of course, the Daily Mail is pro-Brexit and largely right-wing. Some of the lies it says it's that the Remain campaign has been peddling are, well, 3 out of 4 of them have to do with immigration, which is not surprising because immigration has had a big focus in this campaign. The Daily Mail says a Brexit won't, in fact, spark a trade war, as the Remain camp suggests. The paper also says Brussels will not reform its border policy and the idea of kicking out unemployed migrants is a myth. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, has said the government could kick out migrants if they don't have work for 6 months. According to the Daily Mail, that's a myth. It's all lies that the Remain campaign is peddling to try and get people to vote to remain in the EU. Another very dramatic front page, The Sun, not surprising it's dramatic. The Sun obviously wants Britain to leave the EU. I can quote here, "Today you can make history by winning Britain's independence from the crushing might of the Brussels machine."
OK, let's look at the flip side then. What about those papers that really want to stay within the European Union?
Well, one of them, The Times, actually has a similar picture to The Sun, but instead of reading Independence Day, it reads Day of Reckoning. Now, The Times came out in favour of Remain just last week. I can quote there again, "I to the world am like a drop of water that in the ocean seeks another drop." Now, that's William Shakespeare, and that's obviously The Times saying Britain is better off in the EU. Another one, The Guardian, front page reads, "Last-ditch push to stay in Europe." There's a really interesting piece in there, "Cometh the Hour, from Shetland to Scilly, how the drama will unfold." And that's interesting because the way votes are counted in the UK can be very confusing for people who don't live in the UK. And this article gives a good rundown on how it will work. Harper's 12 will get the first results in from Sunderland. Sunderland is always the first constituency to release its results. It's only around 2 a.m. that you need to start concentrating and the results start really coming in. Yeah. It's going to be an all-nighter, I think, for a lot of people in the UK.
Yes.
But it always is in elections there. Yeah. Exit polls are not really done in the same way as they are in France, for instance. And the official result will be at 7 a.m. in the morning.
OK, it's going to be a busy 24 hours for people in the UK. Newspapers in Britain, as we saw them from Claire, very divided over the referendum. What about papers in other European countries then?
Well, they're divided too. I'm going to start with Corriere della Sera. It's an Italian paper. Its headline reads, "Out means out." So if Britain votes to leave the EU, it can't change its mind with another referendum. And crucially, and this is something that the paper argues, Britain shouldn't be allowed to get an easy, cushy deal. You know, it shouldn't be allowed to keep all the trade agreements and the freedom of movement deals that it has. For Corriere della Sera, out means out. If Britain votes to leave, it needs to get out.
Pretty tough talk there. Some of the newspapers outside Britain really, though, appealing to people almost that they really want Britain to stay within the EU.
Yeah, well, I'll start with El Pais. Its front page is pretty clear about where the Spanish paper stands. The headline reads, better in than out. Please.
Very polite.
Very polite, yes. And says the EU is a major achievement. And after the Second World War, you know, the EU was established to keep democracy and peace in Europe. And according to El Pais, the EU's done a pretty good job of that. If Britain leaves, that could destabilise Europe. And obviously, Spain has recent experience of what dictatorships is and what fascism is. And so for El Pais, you know, Britain shouldn't turn its back on an institution which has done a lot for peace in Europe. That's according to El Pais. We've also got the Polish paper, Fact, says, Britain, stay with us. There's a picture there of an aeroplane with the Union Jack painted on it. European stars coming out of its engines, obviously saying that Britain is much better off in the EU and Britain can go and fly much further if it stays in the EU. Also got Die Welt, German paper, again, pretty obvious where this paper stands. We've got someone with a painted face of the European flag kissing someone with a painted face of the Union Jack. The headline is a bit more doomful, though. We've got the headline reads, "Today is a fateful day for Europe." So what's interesting, I think, when we look at the papers outside the UK is that the British papers are obviously really focusing on, you know, is a Brexit good for the UK or is a Brexit bad for the UK? In Europe, it's about, is a Brexit good for my country? Is a Brexit good for the rest of Europe? You know, El Pais, Germany, they have different viewpoints because they are appealing to their own readership. So that's something to bear in mind when you look at the papers outside Europe.
It's going to be fascinating to see what the papers manage to put on their front pages tomorrow morning, because presumably when they
Absolutely.
go to print, they won't actually
Absolutely.
know what the result is. But Claire, thank you very much. Claire with the papers on France 24. We're going to carry on our coverage of the UK referendum right after the break, of course, here on France 24. And we've also got for you a special report on what's probably been the biggest issue, along with the economy, in the UK referendum. That's immigration. That's in the next half an hour on France 24.